Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
1988. B8. Be Mexican-American, spending summer in Mexico. Dad warned me since childhood it's dangerous to be out in the fields or in graveyards alone, especially at night. Grew a childhood fear of magic being real and alive in Mexico and elsewhere. Out in the countryside, and it's dark out, no electricity, only oil lamps, and I didn't know how to work one. So I just hung out on the front porch in the moonlight. Hear bugs being kinda loud. Louder than usual, actually. Hear steps, more than one person. Very close. There's no way I couldn't hear them sooner when they were farther. Look around panicking. No voices, no banter, just shuffling. Gets louder, sounds like a mob. Get up and run inside, trip a few times and psyching myself out thinking I was suddenly in a horror movie and every stumble meant death. Close and lock the door. Grab the fireplace poker that lie next to the doorway and run into my room. Close the door, no lock. Window facing the moon, the room is pretty well lit to adjusted eyes. Facing the door for a long time with poker over shoulder like a baseball bat. Hear nothing. Feel slightly at ease. Walk over to bed, about to let myself fall onto it. Look out of the window at the last moment. A lady draped in a headscarf peering in. Land on bed, feel super vulnerable and jolt. Let go of poker. She remained staring at me. She started showing her teeth, not smiling. What the hell? A guy with a beard comes from the other side, whispering to her. Notices her staring in, turns to the window, sees me, starts baring his teeth too. What is wrong with these people? Too scared to shout. Everyone else in the house is still asleep. He lifts up his hand and starts pressing and inspecting the window, lightly banging on it. Looks like he's going to open it. What do? Holding my breath, pretty much just waiting for him to open or break the window like a coward. Think these people are going to get in, drag me by my ankles all the way to hell. Remember poker. Screw common sense. Pick it up and run to the window. Smash the poker into the pane closest to the guy. Close eyes reflexively from glass and noise. Open them. Both people are gone. Not a sound other than the wind getting in and crickets being loud. Lights turn on in the house. Dad and Uncle come into my room, ask why the door is closed, ask what I have been doing, see the window. Dad flips out. Dad starts shouting at me, ask me what I was thinking, tell him in English that there were people outside staring at me. His eyes go wide and he shuts up. Uncle confused, no speaks English. My dad grabs me by the elbow and shouts at Uncle to gather everybody in the kitchen. Dad mutters something really quick. Uncle shouts everyone to wake up, get up, hurry up, etc. Of 10 family members, 6 end up in the kitchen, the other 4. My dad, uncle, and 2 old cousins go out with a hunting rifle and an old service revolver and a couple shovels. They are gone for 10 minutes, which is a super long time when trying to tell Mom and other women what happened. Gossip occurs, and our least favorite aunt, who likes to rile us up, tells us kids it was the Llorona and her husband. La Llorona is no joke. Me and my young girl cousin are legitimately scared at that point. Mom and other aunt tell her off, saying that's overboard. Guys return back. Nothing. They'll look again in the morning, but nothing was stolen. No cars or tools or chickens or anything. We all decide to stay up, forget sleeping. Coffee and bread passed around and ideas were exchanged about what that shit may have been. Thieves come up, spirits come up. Again, La Llorona comes up. Skinwalkers even come up. Sun comes up. The whole family goes out and checks everything. Blood outside my window, Uncle missed it. My mom audibly worries. Go on with the day. Nothing else happens as we stay for a few more nights. Uncle and cousin and dad alternate guard duty. Except for last night. Newspaper brought from the nearest big town warns country folk about marauding bands of hyper-poor people. Break into barns and farmhouses and kill owners, take as much stuff as they can carry, and leave back to somewhere in the hills. Dozens of people from a couple farmhouses dead already. Only a native farmhand who killed an intruder and drove himself to his town lived long enough to say what happened. But the doctor couldn't keep him alive. Apparently that was my dad's first and only guess as to who those people were. I asked him about it years later and asked what he told my uncle that night. My face when he said I saw Gitanos, and my uncle instantly knew what to do. I look up what Gitanos are in English. Gypsies.
We were living in a little village in Leicestershire called Ashby Magna. It's a very old village and featured in the Doomsday Book. The house always had a strange feeling to it, and a lot of people disliked coming over to stay. We were the fourth family to live in it, breaking the chain of the house being passed down a certain family. I always remember a black shadow would follow me around the house. Every room I went into, nobody else could see it, and I just got on with it. It was not of a particular object and often changed shape. It would kind of creep up on me from the corner of my eye. The scariest occurrence I can personally remember was waking up one night and going to the bathroom. I turned the light on, did my deed, and went to wash my hands. I looked up, and in the mirror I caught the reflection of somebody else in the mirror behind me. I nearly died. I was that scared. I bolted into my parents' room and slept in there. I can't remember what he looked like, though it was definitely a male. Whenever I think back to it, my memory of his face changes. Was this the shadow that followed me? We all knew there was something in the house. It didn't feel harmful or evil, not to us, but it wasn't welcoming. We stayed there for 4 years before moving, and in that time my mum developed a type of depression that had to be medically controlled. It wasn't a particularly good time. We moved to the next village along to an old farmhouse, and the house was sold to some local builders who drank in the same pub as my dad and the bloke who had sold us the same house. My dad got talking to the guy who had sold us the previous house and mentioned this not so welcoming feel to it. Over a couple of drinks, the bloke told my dad how tragedy had struck all of its former residents and how he had refused to live there and sold it. The family that lived there before us, the father died unexpectedly of a blood clot in the brain. His brother, the resident before him, had died from blood poisoning. They amputated his legs but couldn't stop the infection, and it was a nasty way to pass. His wife had also died in the house very young after complications giving birth, and the original residents of the house both died in the house, but of natural causes. So the house had seen its fair share of death. Luckily, none of us are dead yet, and the only lasting effects are my mum's depression. She has since been diagnosed with bipolar, which, let me tell you, is hell to live with. The family who moved in after us have also incurred tragedy in the house. Within 6 months of being there, the father had been diagnosed with terminal cancer and died months later, and his eldest son suffered really bad injuries in a car accident a few years ago. Since we have found out this information, we researched the history of the house, and more or less everything he said checked out. The house really seems to emit really negative energies or attract really unlucky people. I feel somewhat lucky after the cases of the other people, although we did live there the shortest amount of time. The local villages around that area were all well known for traveling folk such as Romany gypsies. And legend has it that the village of Ashby Magna is built on a Druid burial ground. I am yet to find out this is 100%, but I know for sure that Druids did settle around that area, so it would not surprise me. If anyone has visited the area, I am sure they will agree that it is a spooky little village with a very strange feel to it.
Tonight I will share 3 stories with you anons. In the first one, I was in my very early teens at my grandparents' house. It has been only a year since a distant relative who moved in with my grandparents because she was too old and I'll have to take care of herself died. There were times when I was briefly alone in the house, and I distinctly remember how silent it was, especially in the early mornings or nights. I was minding my own business, doing kid stuff, when I heard whispering. Just one whisper mumbled word that I couldn't make out. Just like how that one deceased relative used to speak. Immediately my heart started pumping fast because I knew I was alone, and I knew that I actually heard something. Something that wasn't possible. The second story took place years later, in my late teens. My family moved into an old house near the outskirts of the town. We could regularly see deer and other animals in the nearby fields. We were new to the house and haven't been to the attic yet at all. One day I was home with my sibling when a weird rhythmic noise was heard. I smiled because I thought it was comical. I heard an old mechanical typewriter. Surely, my sister must have been watching something. I came out of my room calling for her, only to find her already in the hallway, eyes wide. She just said, "You heard it too." I immediately said that I thought it was her watching something on her laptop. No one else was there aside from us. I brushed this weird thing away. We must have misidentified some other noise. About an hour and a half later we heard it again, a short string of typing. She rushed to my room saying she's scared. She is a year younger than me, but she hasn't done this since she was 12. We remained alert this time and made little noise ourselves. It seemed to be coming from the attic. Later on, my dad arrived home and we were having lunch when we heard a single type and a ding of what I think was supposed to be the line end signal. My dad asked what this was, and we said we didn't know it was coming from somewhere above. The day after, when my dad also heard it again, he went to the attic and found that amongst other junk, there actually was an old, rusty typewriter there, except there was nobody up there to use it. The third one was a story I've shared here many times. I guess this was one of those things that don't mean much to you, but scared me a lot. I was in my mid-teens, spending a part of my summer vacation with my godparents. They live in a rural area, a small agricultural village. Both of my godparents and down-to-earth people, living an honest, sane life. My godmother is a teacher and my godfather an automotive engineer. They are both optimistic, strong-spirited people who are not easy to scare or make overly worried. One night my godfather came home late, looking bewildered, scared even. I have never seen him like that. He explained that he was doing overtime at work, and when he left the company grounds in his car he noticed a weird light in the sky. Initially he thought it was a high-altitude plane or weird satellite. Around that area there was practically no light pollution, so you could see a shit ton of stars and airplanes. But this light was different. He said that it got bigger and followed his car. He got nervous and accelerated, going to his usual route home, through mostly deserted countryside roads. He thought he'll be losing sight of whatever it is in his rear view mirror shortly as he took turns, but no, it remained stalwart. It followed him until he reached his village. If you've seen fear in the eyes of someone who you know closely, you know it can't be faked. He is also not the kind of man to lie. Later on, my godparents, mostly to my pressure, told me that some years ago, there were reports of strange men lurking around village limits and in the nearby small patch of forest. They were sighted, staring at people from a distance, and would not react to any gesture or attempts at talking or shouting at them. The widely accepted explanation was that they were homeless gypsies and nobody dared to investigate further.
Hey, long-time lurker, first-time poster. I'm about to talk about why I got diagnosed with a schizotypal disorder on a whim and why I moved out at the age of 10 years ago. Some background info. Balkan shithole. Rural area, very religious. BME 13. Nearby old castle. According to folklore around here, popular belief was that black masses are being held once a month. Curiosity got the best of me. Dig into the folklore. The local count died somewhere during the 1800s, was oddly rich and eccentric. The park where the castle is situated is a botanical miracle. The plant variety is incredible, rarely seen anywhere really. Dig into the occult. Find out about the local boogeyman, the Black Rose. Think it's a bunch of crap. I started digging around the park. A few things worth noting. The park consists of a few facilities, one being an old abandoned psych ward, old mines, workers' living area, an island, and the main castle, everything falling apart. Call a buddy to go investigate with me. We decided to search through the mines first. The entrance to the mines is a huge hole in the side of a hill. Most of the rails were torn apart by gypsies who sell the iron. The area is conveniently walled off. Lucky the wood holding it was rotting. Immediately after opening up a path, we are greeted by an awful stench of rotting meat. Must be a rodent or something. As we descend, the smell gets more intense and the walls get tighter, slimier, and certainly more unpleasant. Soon we're greeted by a deer carcass, head nowhere to be found. We bail, disgusted at the sight of the bloated, rotting animal. We take a break from investigating and just carry on with our lives. Fast forward 4 years. 19. More than enough worries in my life. A buddy calls me up, same one from before. Says he'd like to dig into the occult side once more. At that point he worked for a local newspaper company. And a story like that would certainly draw attraction. Instead of going balls deep, we decide to plant some evidence and take photos of these occult items. Burn a couple of ropes, draw a few pentagrams, bring a couple of candles, etc. Balin, this is gonna be big. Few days pass by and I haven't thought much of it. But he calls.
Hey man, my article got denied by the editorial department.
Why though? The story is decent.
Yeah, the editorial team hates it, says the story lacks evidence.
This was odd at the time as the papers delved into any remotely interesting story, especially regarding the folklore, as old people eat that up, no questions asked. Oh crap man, sorry it didn't work out.
That's cool. You down to take a peek into the mines again? I might get some interesting snaps there.
Yeah, sure. In hindsight, this was the worst idea we've had so far. This is more or less the way the whole story unfolds. We walk into the mines. Nothing changed, only this time it's walled off by a thin layer of planks. Breaks easily, luckily, or not. The history repeats as we feel a horrible stench coming from inside, albeit a different one.
Damn, is there always an animal dying here?
This time, however, the animal was much more intricate, a huge catfish.
This looks bloody planted. I can't snap this.
At this point I noticed something rather peculiar. A rose, albeit not a black one, was laid near the beastly fish.
Check this out.
In front of me was a carving that was rather mind-boggling. Think paradoxical puzzles. We snap it and head out. As we exited the mine, we saw a person walking in the forested area around the mine. Weird, but don't think about it. My grandma goes to Mass every Sunday, and as such she knew her stuff since locals talk about pretty much everything. Sunday, Grandma comes visibly upset.
Our family surname was called out.
What the actual hell.png?
The priest said we haven't been giving our dues to the church.
Write it off as the priest being an asshole. I need to add, this was happening around New Year's, and there's a tradition here in which the local priest blesses your house, also demands money. At least this one did. That year no one was around, not even Granny, so no one gave anything. Gran, he's swindling you anyway. Who cares about the bloke anyway? Gran in shock. Next Sunday. According to Gran, the priest said that certain unpaid dues are practicing something quite questionable and should seek redemption as soon as possible. Write it off, can't be us right. My paranoia was growing at that point and I felt watched. I've kept seeing a certain pattern in most of the rumors around town. Most were resurfaced interest in the black rose in the park. Buddy calls soon.
Hey, I've been piling up some evidence and I'd like to look into the workers' area this time.
Evidence for?
Cult activity, man.
Don't be silly, it's just teenagers fooling around. I felt as if I was in a mild denial. After all, the animal carcasses were odd. Curiosity got the best of me, might as well. We get to the park the next day and just skim through the crew quarters, as Buddy called it. We found a lot of files and names, some actually being Buddy's ancestors. We unearthed an old journal of sorts, really moldy and not readable. It did, however, feature the same sort of paradoxical puzzle we've seen in the mines a few weeks back.
Must be a company insignia. Kinda makes you wonder what it means.
After that, we ended our small investigation with some photos of this area we aren't supposed to be in. Now after this, a few odd things happen. Gran dies from a heart attack. Buddy unexpectedly gets evicted from his place. The local politician announces big renovations to the park's facilities as the campaigning for the major polls begin. He lost the vote even though he was a favorite. Are all of these events connected? I don't know, they just kinda happened one after another. My interest in the black masses grew and I managed to scoop up a supposed date of one. The date fell on a Saturday and lasted till Sunday morning, supposedly despite the god. I took a late walk around the park because I was sort of afraid of being near a black mass alone. I noticed a couple people entering the park. I got some very weird looks from them. Because of my fear of these black masses and these crappy accidents, I grew more and more paranoid. Weeks pass by. Have a manic episode at work. Get fired. Afterwards, I went to see a doctor and got diagnosed with this bull. Did I think all of this up in my head? Hell no. After that, I felt very ostracized and almost as if people were always talking about me, quite odd. In the end, one thing was for sure, me and Buddy were onto something. Or at least they thought we were, as 5 years ago a huge money laundering scandal was uncovered. The money was used to fund a non-profit organization which was never named.
My great-grandmother was of Romani descent, and people thought she was one of the cunning folk. They just said white, though. My grandmother still insists she was able to tell a person's future by looking in their eyes, and could heal problems by rubbing them. I never met her myself, but she did see me when I was a baby and said I wasn't very well, that I had problems with my eyes, and that she could sort out some of it, but not all of it. She massaged my back and held her hand over my eye for a bit, and then gave me back to my parents when they were ready to go home. When I turned 4, after she died, my mother noticed one of my eyes was shiny when light went on it. Turned out I had a cataract in it, and it was due to a couple of faulty COL4AX genes. The same faulty genes caused Allport syndrome in my 2 younger brothers, who were born after my great-grandmother died, but the condition skipped me for an unknown reason. All it had done was cause the cataract, but only in one eye. I still don't believe in all that stuff, but it really is one of the few things that made me doubt myself.
Do you have any more stories?
Only one, but not about healers or witches. A ghost story the boys in my family get told when they're older. As I said before, my father's side are Romani gypsies, but they've been living in Britain for the last 3 or 4 centuries. They're not a bright bunch, they're extremely superstitious, but they're also violent at times. They would get into fights with other families and the like, but usually it would all just be fist fights. On one occasion, sometime in the early 60s, they needed to do a little more than just fight. There was a man in a rival family that had attacked a few young girls from the other gypsy families, the sort of shit that could have led to his whole family being wiped out for it. But all his relatives knew the drill. They refused to harbor him and gave him over to the men that were looking for him. They took him down to Epping Forest, stabbed him with dozens of knives, and buried him with them all sticking out like a pincushion. All they took from the body was his big keeper ring. That was supposed to be the end of it. 3 days later, one of the men there saw the same bloke at a bare-knuckle match. Not a mark on him, happy as anything. He freaks out, thinking it's a ghost or punishment from God or something, and runs off to get the others. They go back to the forest, but can't remember where they buried him. What they do find are tons of knives all sticking out of a tree in the shape of a cross. I say either the bloke mistook another person for the dead guy and freaked out, and the knife thing was just to make it seem more real, or they killed the wrong person and the shame and guilt was worse than making it seem like magic had happened. The keeper ring disappeared, but they probably just flogged it and didn't want to split the cash, or maybe someone else nicked it from them.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.